Clinton Davis, and this is going to be a guitar lesson on movable shapes. Another way of saying that is this is going to be a lesson where we learn common ways to think about moving up the neck and fretting our chords, making melodies happen beyond the kind of first position or open chord range. If you're someone that's already done a little bit of exploring of traditional American guitar picking, you might sometimes come across tunes where you find you're doing all sorts of fretwork way up the neck, and you might ask yourself, how on earth did anyone ever figure out they could come up here and make some good chords or make some good melodies happen? So we're going to talk about some of the thinking that goes into understanding some of these up the neck positions and some of the logic that goes into how they're designed. We're going to just learn a collection of tunes that are going to introduce some of the most common movable shapes that we take and move across the neck. All right, first thing we got to do, as always, is get in tune with each other. So we're going to be in standard tuning throughout this whole lesson. So string 6 is going to be an E. String 5 is A. String 4 is D. String 3 is G. String 2 is B. String 1 is E. All right, so this is Angeline the Baker. This is a really, really common old-time fiddle tune you're pretty likely to hear at an old-time jam or maybe even a bluegrass jam. Now, we're going to use this one to take our first look at what a movable chord is and how to make sense out of them. In this tune, we only really need two different chords. We need an A chord and we need a D chord. But as you can see, I was playing the melody no lower than the 5th fret. Everything was up here and I made it all the way up to the 12th fret. So I was finding other ways to make those chords happen, but in ways that allowed me to reach notes way up on the neck. The answer to this is pretty simple. Whenever we talk about movable chords, we're talking about hand shapes or hand positions that you already know how to make. We're just trying to learn new ways to think about how to position them in strategic ways that allow us to grab some notes up the neck and still exploit open strings. Most often, low strings. As our fretwork gets higher and higher up the neck, having a low open string becomes more and more important to make sure that we still have some body to support the melody that we're playing. So it feels like there's a body supporting everything. Sometimes I like to think about these as big bar chords that we are whittling away until we are left with at least one finger free, usually the pinky, that we can then put to work playing the melody. So, for example, if we want to make an A chord up the neck, what we're going to do is we're going to think about an E chord position, moving it up the neck until we were to reach an A chord. You know, this is probably common knowledge to you if you've already been playing a lot of bar chords. that you can fret your bar here at the 5th fret and have your E shape on top of it, and there you are with an A chord. But then we can start the process of whittling away. We don't need all of these notes here. Since A is an open string, what that means is that we don't need to really fret string 6. We don't really need to fret string 5 either, so we can get rid of those, and suddenly we have some fretted notes on strings 1, 2, 3, and 4, still taken from that shape, and an open string 5 to give us some body underneath it, and then now we can put that pinky to work. Now, we're going to use this shape here to make an A chord, but we're also going to be using it later on in the tune, shifted all the way up to give us a D chord. So again, it's the same shape, but positioned elsewhere on the neck to give us a D chord. So again, if I were to take this shape, what I could do is just think about moving this shape up the fretboard as if it were a single note. So in other words, the A note, traveling from there up a whole step or 2 frets, would bring you to B. So this would be a B chord. From B to C is 1 fret, so this is where a C chord would be. And from one more whole step, that's going to bring me to D. So here's where my D chord will be with the same shape. But importantly, I'm still actually going to be using the A string for a bass note with this shape, because A is a note that belongs to the D chord. So, again, it's the same shape, but we're going to use it only when there is some special relationship between a low open string that allows me to have this supporting all these other notes up here. So that's one type of movable chord we're going to see in here. There's 2 other ones. We're also going to be making a D chord like this. So this is essentially an A chord shape, an open A chord shape, just like this. The idea is that we've taken this and we have shifted it up, again, to the 5th fret, where that shape with the bar now gives us a D chord. And we're going to whittle the chord away by, again, thinking about, well, do any of these open strings serve the chord D? And as it turns out, yeah, strings 5 and 4 both do. So based on that, I'm just not even going to use string 6 at all. My index is only going to have to be in charge of string 1. I don't need to fret string 4. Now I can just have 3 fingers on the fretboard and 1 free. Now, this type of fingering will be sufficient for this tune, but in other tunes, in other circumstances, you might fret it so that your pinky is free, making it even easier to have a melody note on string 1 moving around. So you can grab a higher note on string 1. But again, we won't do that in this tune. But now we have a way to move between the chords A and D that have us higher up on the neck and also in the same part of the neck. In both instances, we're spanning frets 5 to 7. All right, here's one last chord that we're going to make. We're going to find one more way to make an A chord. And this time we're going to use the shape of an open D chord. And this one is going to take us very, very high on the neck. So let's just kind of walk this up step by step. So again, we can sort of understand the thinking of how do you make an A chord out of this. So I'm going to think of just these 3 notes that I'm fretting. These are the movable notes in the movable shape. And I'm going to move it up the neck, sort of thinking about an individual D note coming up the scale. So up a whole step would bring me to E, then a half step would be F, whole step to G, another whole step brings me to A. So there I am with my A chord. I'm at the 9th and 10th frets. And from there, if I want to make an A chord and still have some body, again, my thumb can come down and grab grab this open string 5, and now I've got 2 different places on the neck to make an A chord. And I didn't really have to relearn or learn any new kind of hand positions. It's just a matter of learning how to think about where you can move these shapes to get the chord that you want and still have a bass sound underneath it. So let's use those now to go through Angeline the Baker. I'm going to start off with this A chord built out of an E shape. Now the pinky is free here, and it's going to be the finger that does the most work to make this melody happen. The melody is going to be entirely on strings 1 and 2. And I'm either going to use chord notes, or the pinky is going to raise up string 2 or string 1. And in fact, at one point, I'm actually just going to jump up to the 9th fret for a single note. You're going to see that this is actually going to be possible because of that open string thumb note. I'm going to time the shift up here whenever I'm playing that low open string with my thumb. So let's put this together. It's going to start off here. So again, the only left hand move there is the pinky dropping down or lifting up. Going on from there, I'm going to do a little bit more of that. Go into that D chord that I could make here at the 5th and 7th frets. No extra fretwork required. Back to the A chord now, where I'm going to do more pinky work to make the melody happen. When I'm doing this, my thumb is alternating between strings 5 and 4. One of them being an open string, the other one being a fretted one. So as I'm doing this, the reason I can reach up to that 9th fret and it still sounds like nothing's missing is I'm grabbing it while my thumb is grabbing that open string 5, and then I jump right back into my A chord shape with the pinky still down. And now I can get everything in there that I want. I get this thumb pattern that's unbroken, and I get the melody note that I want. I'm going to shift back into that D chord one more time, and then the A chord. That's the first section of the tune. Second section of the tune is where I'm going to go up higher. And I'm going to be moving between this A chord made out of a D shape and then this high D chord that I showed you a second ago. So, with this A chord, as usual, the pinky is going to be doing the most work. Now, it's going to need to be able to reach the 12th fret on both strings 1 and 2. And that's definitely possible for a lot of hands. Some people might find it a little bit more comfortable if they adjust this shape here and actually bar strings 1, 2, and 3 with the index and have the middle finger on string 2. That way, that's what I like to do. It's a little bit more comfortable for me. So try either way and just see what feels good to you. Now I'm going to start here with the pinky down on string 1, and I'm going to create this descending melody. That's just coming straight down the notes on string 1 and 2 with the pinky, without the pinky, string 2, with the pinky, without the pinky. And the thumb is going to be down here on my open string and then jumping up to string 3. Because that's a string that I'm fretting, it's giving me a chord note. So here's that thumb pattern with the melody now. Same thumb pattern now of string 5 and 4, and the melody note is a chord note on string 3. I'm going to come back after that into my A chord with the pinky down, and I'm going to do more of that descending melody again. Back into my D chord. It's a melody moving from string 2 to 3. And now to get out of this, I'm going to hold my shape, which is right here giving me a D chord, shift it to where it's going to give me an A chord, and I'm going to find my final melody note on string 2. And then from there, I'm in a good position to go back to the top of the tune. Play that again. All right, so let's string this all together now. We're going to play it really slow from beginning to end and see how this all fits together again. This is a really interesting tune from the repertoire of Sam McGee. We're going to look at another one of his tunes in this lesson as well, the Railroad Blues. And in an earlier volume of this series, on Introduction to Fingerpicking, we also looked at a couple of other guitar breaks that he took. This is a really unusual tune just because it doesn't really sound quite like the other tunes that Sam would play. Other tunes that he played were often melodies learned from hanging out with a lot of black musicians where he was near Franklin, Tennessee. But this one has a very distinct sound altogether. It sounds a little bit more like parlor guitar pieces, you know, part of an older tradition of sheet music pieces that would be really popular throughout the country. Sometimes you would find that a piece of sheet music, guitar sheet music, would become so popular that it would sort of get passed around from person to person as part of an oral tradition anyway. So maybe that's what happened with this one, but I don't really know. But in any event, let me walk you through some of the up the neck shapes that we're going to be seeing in this one. Right off the bat, we're going to be using this shape right here. This is going to be a really common shape we're going to use in a ton of tunes. Very handy. And let's make sense out of it. It's really, again, related to the A chord, where we have this straight line across strings 4, 3, and 2. And the idea here is we're using our pinky so that we can fret string 1 as well. In order to do that, we have to, of course, have the index lay down as a bar. And once we have that, now we have a shape across strings 1, 2, 3, and 4 that we can shift across the neck. We're going to shift this up to make it a C chord. So again, from A up a whole step would be B. One more half step brings us to C. Up the neck. Now, we're actually not going to use any open strings to support this chord, but we are going to make a really common type of melodic move out of this shape, where we have our pinky down as a chord note, but we can lift it up to make this nice flowing melody happen across this shape. So that's going to come back a couple times in the tune. Also, we're going to be using this movable E shape that we tried out before in Angeline the Baker. We're going to have that at the 3rd fret. But again, here, we're only going to need strings 1, 2, 3, and 4. No open strings required. We're going to see it again 2 frets higher to make an A chord, where, again, the open 5th string A is going to give us some body to support that chord. We're going to be making an E chord using the D shape. So earlier we took this shape and we moved it way up the neck to make an A. This time we have a much shorter distance to travel because we're going from D to E, just a whole step away. So take these and scoot them up 2 frets, and there you are with an E chord that you can support with an E string. So that's going to do it for the movable shapes in this tune. As we go through this tune, you're going to notice that, again, one of the distinct features of this tune is there really isn't a constant alternating thumb pattern the way we expect to see in a lot of finger-picking pieces. This one, to me, almost feels like a duet between high melody notes and low bass runs. So let's put this together. Now we're going to start off with this C chord that we put together, but we're actually going to slide up to it almost every time we do it. So what you want to do is think about this shape, but start with your index down here at the 2nd fret, and then on string 4 we're going to slide up there to the 5th fret. And that's going to be a pickup note, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. From there, we're going to jump over to the high pinky note, lift it, and just travel down the remaining strings in our shape. From there, we're going to go into a pretty standard F chord shape here. We're only going to need strings 1, 2, 3, and 4. The pinky is going to do all the work, making the melody happen. It's going to be on string 1 or string 2 at the 3rd fret, like this. From there, we're going to move into an open G chord shape. And we're just going to pluck an open G string and then jump up to play our high G and make some more melody happen here. And here's where that bass note finally comes in, way down on the low G. We're going to come up the scale. We're going to play a C chord and a G chord. From there, we're going to start over a little bit. We're going to bring the index finger to that string 4 2nd fret note and slide up into our C chord. This time when we arrive at this C chord, we're just going to have single notes. that does it for the opening section of the tune. After this, we're going to have a C chord with an alternating thumb from 5 to 4. We're going to have a G7 chord where, again, thumb is alternating between 6 and 4. And then some fast melody work here on string 1, where we're going to have to bring this pinky down and shift it up. We're going to have the pinky at 3, shift it up to 5. From here, return to 3 with your index, open, C, G, and here's where your pinky's going to make a big reach to F sharp, back to G. So let's look at that again. Pinky up, returning to a C chord position here, and that quick little G, F sharp turnaround with your pinky. Now, we're going to make this A chord with the pinky down, and just do a simple boom chuck kind of rhythm here. That's thumb on 5, and then coming up to pluck strings 1, 2, 3. We're going to lower that string 1 note down to fret 3. Thumb on 4, pluck the rest of the chord. Now, we're going to make something kind of like a D minor chord here. Open D note, back to a G chord, where we're just going to pluck this low G note once and play a bunch of melody notes after it. And here's that same bass run as before. So again, all that in context. Here's that G bass note, melody notes moving around, bass run, C chord notes, D7 chord shape after that, with a little boom chuck pattern there. That's the thumb on 4, then the thumb comes over to 3 so we can pluck strings 1, 2, 3 all together. And we're going to take a scale downward, starting on D all the way to G. Of these chord plucks where all 3 fingers are up here on the top 3 strings, and we have a melody motion from G down to F. All right, now we're going to repeat that. Here's that pinky riff into our A chord, boom chucking. D minor. Going into a G chord where we just hit the bass note, the melody moves around, walk that bass up to C. Now here it's almost like the melody moves into the bass. I'm going to have that ring finger that I'm normally fretting string 5 with, and bring that over to string 6. I'm going to do a similar kind of boom chuck rhythm here. I'm going to play this low G with my C chord. I'm going to play an open D string with a G7 shape, and then return to a C chord. It's kind of like a tag ending for this second section of the tune. We're going to recycle that later on at the end of the third section, the third and final section. So again, it sounds like this. Now, here's where a lot of these movable shapes are going to come back in pretty quick succession. We're just going to be making a succession of chords here and kind of just rhythmically hammering them out. We're going to start with this G chord here, built out of the movable E shape. And we're going to have thumb on 4, then over to 3 for a bunch of pinches. Into our C chord, where we're going to do the same thing. Into our E chord, which is again the D shape shifted up 2 frets. The thumb is going to come all the way over here for the low E note, and then here's now back to our A chord. Now something similar from the opening of the tune, we're going to come down here to our F chord. And then that same tag ending from the previous section. On a C chord, but my low note comes over to a low G. G7, back to C. So, a lot going on in this tune. Just about everything is based out of a chord shape. But a lot of the details keep changing. And we very rarely are just strumming a chord or having a consistent thumb pattern going the whole time. But if you're just thinking about it in terms of chords, that's one thing you can hold on to help keep the tune straight in your head. So here it is one more time, really slow from the top to the bottom. F chord, G chord, C, G. Second section. Here's that pinky lick. A chord. D minor. G. D7. G chord, C chord, E, A, F, C, G7, C. So this is going to be an arrangement of Railroad Blues. This was a big signature guitar tune for Sam McGee. And we're going to keep some parts of Sam McGee's arrangement in here. And then we're going to change some other parts of how Sam played this, just so we can use the melody, the same tune, to expand some of the melodic possibilities for the shapes that we've learned about so far. For example, we're going to take this movable A chord that we've used. We just used it in the Franklin Blues to play a C chord. We're going to scoot this all the way up to make an E chord now. So going to get pretty high up on that neck again. If we know that this is C, we can go up a whole step to D, another whole step to E. And there we are. Got our bar at the 9th fret and the pinky at the 12th. Now, in the previous tune, in Franklin Blues, we were learning about lifting that pinky up. Now we're going to be taking that pinky and putting it in other parts of the shape. So from here, we might expect to see that pinky on string 1 or lift it up so that string 1 gives us this note. We might bring that pinky over to string 2, where we would fret it at the same place we fretted string 1. We can lift that up and get another note. And in this tune, we're going to have that pinky come over to the 3rd string and also grab it at that same 12th fret for a blue note, or a bluesy sounding note in the melody. We're also going to take this A chord that we've used. It's built again out of the E shape, but shifted up to where we have an A chord. And we're going to again do more work with this pinky. We've already done some quite a bit of work here where we'll use it to raise string 1 up 2 frets or string 2 up 2 frets. Now we're going to reach even further on string 2 with the pinky to again grab a blue note or a bluesy sounding note in our melody. Now, another thing we're going to do is we're going to find a way to squeeze in another note on string 3. In order to do this, we're going to adjust our bar so that our index can actually come over as far as string 3. String 3 is a string that we already have our middle finger on, but this way, with the bar behind here, we can hammer onto that note. So here's our A chord, and we can hammer onto that note. So it allows us to sort of take the same kind of sound that we would make with an open E chord. We often hammer on to that note. We just have the nut helping us here. Up here, the bar is essentially acting like the nut. And so we can hammer on from the bar into our chord note. All right, and then the last thing that we're going to need to look at is this really cool shape that Sam used to play this opening riff, this opening bluesy, bendy riff. Now, it looks like this. We have a finger on string 5, fret 7. We have a finger on string 1, fret 7. And then a finger on string 2, fret 8, which whenever we play, we're going to be bending. Now, this is all born out of, again, the open A chord. If you think of that shape being movable and that bar coming up to the point where you're making an E chord, you would have no need to fret string 6 because it's an E. It's going to be the root of this chord up here. But we would need to fret string 5, so we're going to keep our index finger there. Now, melodically, all we need are the notes on strings 1 and 2, which you can see are at the 7th and 9th frets. But in our shape, we're going to be at the 8th fret and bend up to the same pitch as that 9th fret. So So that's going to leave us with this. We have the bass, or the body of the chord here, and enough notes fretted here to make a melody happen. So let's start putting these to work in this tune. We're going to kick it off with this E chord bending shape. We're going to have a really atypical thumb pattern where we're going to do low, high, high, high. And then over top of that, we're going to be moving between this high B note and this bent G into a G sharp note. All those notes are synchronized with the thumb except some of those bends. Well, we have two syncopated bends in a row. From there, we're moving into our A chord shape. And remember to have that bar across strings 1, 2, and 3 so that we can hammer on to that note on string 3. From there, we're going to need that pinky down on string 2, which will then lift up. We're going to do that riff again, but with the pinky over on string 1, where it's going to be down and then lifted. So again, it's kind of the same move with a hammer and then a pinky down and lift, just pinky on 2 and then pinky on 1. Now let's bring that pinky over to string 2 where it's going to reach up to that higher note at the 8th fret, this bluesier sounding note. So now we're just using that pinky to make a nice descending melody from string 2, fret 8, fret 7, and then lift it so the bar can catch it at 5. Back to our open E, where we're just going to do a hammer on string 2, fret 2. From there, we're going into a B7 chord, but we're going to take this low B note that our middle finger grabs on string 5 and move that over to a low F sharp on string 6, fret 2. And we're going to do a hammer on onto this note we've got with our ring finger on string 3. Now what we're going to do is take just these notes here that we're fretting on strings 1 and 3, and we're going to take those for a little ride. We're going to bring that up to the 4th fret, and here the thumb is going to come off the bass entirely, and rather than pulsing on a low string, it's going to pulse on string 3. And then we're going to add other melody notes around it on strings 1 and 2. Now, when you're listening to this, it can be a little tricky to make sense out of it when you're listening to it, in part because string 3 and string 2 are giving us the same note. So just make sure you're watching the right hand carefully with this. Back into an E chord. So after this, now we're going to play a guitar lick that's going to get us way high up on the neck. This is kind of an imitation of when Sam would sing this. He would do this really high singing, almost kind of like scat singing, sort of a thing that was kind of imitating a train whistle. So we're going to make this super high E chord, where again, bar at the 9th fret, pinky at the 12th fret. And then we're going to put that pinky to work, moving around from string 1 or 2 or 3, but always at the 12th fret. We're going to do this. on string 1. It's just hanging out there. I'm going to lift it and bring it to string 2. Bring the pinky over to string 3. To get this effect right, you're going to have that pinky down on string 3 and make sure that it's clearing or not bumping into string 2, because we're going to be going rapidly between strings 3 and 2, plucking them over here. And then we're going to have to lift up that blue note underneath our pinky. From there, going back to our A chord. Again, barring across strings 1, 2, 3, we're going to do the same riff we did before. Pinky on 1, a higher note on string 2, E chord. Same B7 chord lick as before. Make your full B7 and make sure that your middle finger is fretting string 6 and not string 5. So from there we're going to do that same hammer-on lick. And then again, taking these top 2 fretted notes for a ride here up to the 4th fret, down to the 2nd fret, E chord. Okay, I'm going to play all this as slow as I can now. Let's see how all this hangs together. Starting up in this crazy E chord position. Okay, now we're going to look at a tune from Big Bill Broonzy called Saturday Night Rub. This is a really good example of a pretty ragtime influenced guitar piece. It's ragtimey in the rhythms that it's making, it's ragtimey and also the kind of chord progression that it's going to make. This whole tune is basically one chord progression, but we're going to learn how to make it happen at 2 different points in the neck. A lot of the time this tune is just going to be going between the chords D or D7 and G. Now, we're never actually going to make a D or D7 chord in this kind of open position the way we normally do. We're going to build that out of a different shape. We're going to build this out of the C7 chord shape. So what you want to try to do here is make your C chord add your pinky onto string 3, fret 7. That's your C7 chord. We're going to move this up the neck to turn it into a D7. So again, it's going to be a short distance up the neck because from C to D, it's just a whole step. So take the shape, move it up 2 frets, and there we are. Now, this is a shape that we're going to use later on in the tune, but what we're going to do right now is we're going to get rid of the fretted note that we have on string 5 because A is a note that belongs in this chord, so we can get away with not fretting that. I'm going to have this ring finger take over string 3. That's going to leave my pinky free now, which is what we want. This pinky is going to be free so that we can sometimes use it on string 1, fret 5, which is actually another chord tone. So we can actually think of this as a movable shape in and of itself. This movable shape will come back in later tunes, so make sure this sinks in when you're looking at this. So again, this is built out of the C7 shape. We're moving it up, and then we're adjusting our fingering so that we can actually fret string 1 up here at fret 5. And then the basic move we're going to be making with our left hand is to either have string 1 fretted or open. Now, some other movable shapes that we're going to see. We're going to make that D7 chord with the shape of an A7 chord, one that looks like this. We've used this in a couple of tunes before, where you're going to bar across strings 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then have another finger raising string 1 another fret. So if this is an A7, we want to raise it up until it turns into a D7. Here's A, up a whole step to B, up a half step to C, another whole step to D, and there we are. Now, we're going to be doing a move here where we're going to try to take, for melodic purposes, try to take the note on string 3 and raise it up 2 frets while we hold the rest of this chord down there. So that's where we're going to have to be a little bit more specific about how we're fingering string 1 right now. Try it with your index finger. That's going to free up the ring to kind of come up over here to string 3 where we can raise that note 2 more frets. And now we can have a D7 chord shape and this one note that can move around. All right, now the last movable shape. We're going to have this movable D shape right here. We've taken this and we've made an E chord out of it in previous tunes, and we've also made an A chord out of it. Now we're going to move this and make a G chord out of it. So from D up to E is a whole step, half step to F, whole step to G. There it is. Now, if we want to use any open strings to get a low sound to support this, we can use string 4, because that is a chord note. Just like if you were going to play an open G chord, string 4 is open, so we know we can use it if we're fretting the rest of the G chord up here. Now, we're going to have the same melodic motion with this chord shape. We're going to take the note on string 3 and try to raise it up 2 frets. That's where this free pinky is going to come in. Now, because of how this shape is going to fit in with the tune, you might find it helpful to not use 3 fingers to make this chord shape here, but to bar it. And then you can, again, use your ring finger to raise the note on string 3. All right, so we're going to put those to work in Saturday Night Rub. It's going to work like this. I'm going to start here with my D7 chord built out of my C7 shape. And I'm going to be starting with the pinky up. The melody is going to move from string 2 to 1, open, then up to the pinky note. I'm going to lift that pinky, and then I'm going to go from strings 1 and 2, and then back up to the pinky note. So we're going to do that while the thumb is going between open A and our string 4 note. Now we're moving into an open G chord, and we're going to be doing some fretwork here at the 3rd fret, where we're either going to need to grab strings 3, 2, or 1 at the 3rd fret. The ring finger or the pinky can grab these notes, so arrange it however feels natural to you. But we're going to be jumping from E to B flat to B to G. So we're going to have that same melody twice in a row. The rhythm's going to be a little bit different on it. Do that while the thumb goes between strings 6 and 4. Alright, back to our D7 chord, where we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. Back to the G chord, where again, same riff. From G and D and head on to C, where we're just going to have a melody going from an open E string up to G. Back to your G chord, where you're going to make a similar but not identical riff. Now we're going to go from start on B and then travel down to B flat, D7, created before, and then back to G. So that's just a melody on string 1 moving from a fretted G to an open E and back again. So that's one pass through this chord progression. It's D7 to G, D7 to G, then we have C, G, D7, G. So from here, as we go forward through the piece, we're making that exact same chord progression happen, but we're going to be using different shapes further up the neck to create a sense of contrast. So it doesn't sound like we're repeating, even though in some sense we are. So we're going to come up to this higher D7 shape. And we're going to make a pattern here where we're going to be hitting the chord with a kind of a boom chuck type rhythm here. From string 4 over to our high strings 1 and 2. And then after that, we're going to be doing this rolling pattern with our right hand. This is where we're playing rapid notes in succession, all the same amount of time, but flowing between thumb, index, middle. This is kind of like a banjo player trick, I guess. And we're just repeating that. Every time we get to that thumb, it's going to be here on string 3. Remember, that's the note we said we were going to raise or lower back into the chord shape. We're going to be rolling with the right hand. Every time we get to that thumb, that note on string 3 is going to change. So it's going to sound like this. I'm going to start this roll with my thumb on string 3. The note is going to be raised from the chord already. And then it's going to be raised, lowered, raised, lowered. So we're going to make that shape, and we're going to do a boom chuck, roll, this high G shape. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to hold the shape. We're going to do a boom chuck with the thumb on string 4. And then again, we're going to roll, starting with our thumb on string 3 with that raised note. Back to D7 for the same thing. Back to G for the same thing. Then after that, we're coming back down to first position where we're going to wrap up the tune, kind of like we did the first time through. With a C chord that moves into a G chord with the same bluesy melody as before. And now we're just going to have a single note ending here, where we're going to come up through a lot of the notes of a D7 chord. A, D, E, F, sharp, G. And then at the end, we're just pinching our way out of a G chord. So again, same chord progression as before. We're just using a different part of the neck and therefore a different range of notes and a different kind of rhythm or a different sort of texture to just keep things interesting, even though the chord progression underneath everything is staying the same. So we're going to play through that one more time now. We're going to keep it slow so we can keep track of these positions and all of the different little patterns that we're using here. All right, this song is kind of a personal favorite of mine. This one's called the Amos Johnson Rag. And we're going to be basing this tune off of a recording that Sam McGee made. So Sam McGee's name comes up often in this lesson, but it's not his name on the rag. Amos Johnson was a black guitar player from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky. And this tune kind of spread out far and wide. Amos Johnson was from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky, and he showed it to someone, who liked it so much that they learned it, and then they showed it to Sam McGee down again in Franklin, Tennessee. Meanwhile, other people in Muhlenberg County, or from Muhlenberg County, heard Amos Johnson play this rag, and it spread to other players. One notable example is Merle Travis, probably the most famous guitar player from Muhlenberg County. He learned this tune, again, not directly from Amos Johnson, but Merle loved it so much that he made a recording of it himself. He just called it Guitar Rag, and so he arranged it in a slightly, well, actually a very different way than Sam McGee played it. But really good example of this game of telephone that is, the oral tradition where music passes from hand to hand and everybody changes it a little bit. So we're going to learn this based on Sam McGee's recording. Definitely give that a listen, but do yourself a favor and look up Merle Travis's Guitar Rag too. Both really, really great records. So we're going to look at this tune. It's really only going to have one movable shape, and it's a movable shape we've been using a lot in other tunes in this lesson, but we're going to just learn some more melodic possibilities of this shape. We're going to revisit this high E chord that we've been playing. As a reminder, this is built out of the A chord with a fretted first string. Now, a lot of people get familiar with this shape and the melodic possibilities that are possible on the higher end, the higher notes of this shape. So we've used a lot of those notes so far in previous tunes. What this tune does that others don't is it exploits the bottom end of the shape for melodic purposes. So what we're going to see in this shape is notes that are going to move around on string 4. We've got these two fingers that are free, and they're going to help us take the note on string 4 and raise it up 1 fret or 2 frets. And then we're also going to reach over here with that ring finger over to string 5 at the 11th fret. Now, once you start doing this, if you look at your fingers carefully, this is starting to look almost like a barred open G chord. Again, if you were going to take and pretend that your index bar is behaving like the nut, and you were going to scoop that up here, you would wind up with pretty much all the notes that we're going to wind up with here at the end of this high E chord riff that we're going to make. We're going to get back to that in a little bit. So, starting at the beginning of the tune, we're going to have plenty of interesting fret work to do here in first position. And let's just start at the beginning and I'll kind of walk you through it as we go. We're in the key of E, and with this tune we're going to be doing a lot with our pinky reaching up to string 1, fret 4 for the melody. This is a big reach for most people. It's a big reach for me. For that reason, it's a lot easier for me if I don't fret the full E chord. I'm going to hollow it out. I'm never going to be picking string 5 with my thumb, so I'm going to unfret that and then scoot my middle finger over to take over string 4. Now I've got more of my hand freed up on the high part of the instrument, and that reach for my pinky is now a whole lot more manageable. So we're going to start off here. We've got a melody that's going to be jumping from G sharp to B, E, and back to G sharp. Nice little arpeggio for the E chord. We're going to come over to the second frets of string 1 and 3 to move these notes around. We're going to come back to this position and this kind of movement a lot in this tune. Back to E. E7. Now here we have a really beautiful and again kind of characteristic to Sam McGee, a really kind of unusual melody you don't hear, or melodic motion you don't hear in a lot of other tunes. That's really a little bit quirky and completely memorable. So it's going to require some specific fretting in order to make it sound really fluid. First off, you're going to be making an A chord here, but I want you to do it to where your index finger is free. This is actually going to pay off later on in the tune. And then our pinky is going to be moving around to grab the melody notes that we want. So it might be on string 2 to fret that common chord note. We're going to have the melody come over to open E. The pinky's going to grab F sharp at the 2nd fret. And then we're going to come back down the way we came to C sharp. Then we're going to go into our E chord, the way we've been fretting it with just 2 fingers. Now we can just leave the middle finger where it is, and the index finger is going to be conveniently positioned at the 1st fret here. Now we're going to use these fingers to grab other melody notes around here. From this position, the melody is going to travel from B down to B flat, which we can grab with our pinky on string 3, fret 3, up to B, C sharp, and then back down. So again, that A chord into the E riff. Back up to these 2 different 4th fret notes on strings 1 and 3, down to 3, and then our B7 chord. We're going to repeat that much of the tune. Second fret notes up to the 4th, E chord. Specially fretted A and E chords. Now we're going to come back up to those 4th fret notes. This time we're going to go directly to 2 and then to E. Now here's where we're going to jump up to the high part of the neck. So here's what I recommend you do. We're going to be ending this section of the tune with an E chord. When you get to this last high thumb note, go ahead and get your index finger there. It's going to form the part of the bar that's up here, but we're going to go ahead and set the hand here so that we can slide it all the way up to the 9th fret where that bar is going to be. By the time we get there, that's going to be beat 1 on the new section. So, once we get there, we're going to start this little back and forth between the low string where we have our melody, and we're just kind of coming up to string 1 and just hitting it for this little bell-like sound in between all of the melody notes. So yeah, look at that one more time here. So this is where string 4, when I land on this shape, it's just the chord shape. Then I'm going to raise it up 2 frets. This is string 4. I'm going to raise up 2 frets, then bring it down chromatically, and then have this ring finger come over to string 4, fret 11. From there, I'm going to slide down to the 7th fret where I have an E note, and then this low E note on string 6. So all together. Really great riff here where we're sliding up and we're hitting all of these E's across many, many octaves here. From here, we're going to be working with these kind of double fretted notes here, these notes that we both fret at the same fret on strings 1 and 3. And we're going to be moving them around a lot, but I want you to do this with your pinky and your ring finger so that we're going to have this thumb come over and grab this lone F sharp note. So again, we're doing the thumb note, 4th frets, 2nd frets, E chord. Now we're going to repeat this high E part. And we're going to repeat a little bit of this thumb riff here. We're going to lower string 3, 1 fret, and then into our B7 chord. From here, we're kind of returning back to the low open E chord riff. 2nd frets, 3rd, 4th, E chord. Again, our A to E chord melody. And here's how we have a really beautiful tag here, where we're going to be on our E chord, and the melody is going to go from B, C sharp, E. The pinky is going to reach up for this long G sharp. And then we're going to repeat the A to E melody. 4th fret, 2nd fret, E chord. Okay, now let's try hearing that whole tune a little bit slowed down. See how it all strings together. So now we're going to look at the Victory Rag from Maybelle Carter. Now, Maybelle Carter was a legendary guitar player, part of the original Carter family, the so-called first family of country music. And she made who knows how many hundreds of recordings in the early pre-war days of recording hillbilly music. And her guitar playing was incredibly distinct in those days. A lot of her playing in that early stage of her career demonstrated what people now call the Carter scratch, a really distinctive way of playing melody in the bass part or the low notes of the instrument while you still continue to strum over top of it. And this tune was not a part of her repertoire at the time, at least it doesn't seem that way. She made a recording of this on a record much, much later in her life. And it does not seem that anyone is entirely certain of where on earth this tune came from. But Maybelle made a recording of it later in her life, and shortly after that you started to see other guitar players picking this tune up. So this one is another great ragtime tune. It's going to have some circle of fifth progressions, another common like hallmark of ragtime influenced music. And that means it's going to give us a lot of really nice chord changes, a lot of different chords to work through, again, up the neck. So let's just kind of go through each of these up the neck shapes we're going to look at and make a little bit of sense out of them. We're going to come back to this D7 chord that we looked at earlier in Saturday Night Rub. Back there it looked like this. And remember that we were saying it's built out of the C7 shape. But for Saturday Night Rub, we scooted up 2 frets, that makes a D7, and then we rearranged our fingers so that string 1 was fretted. Well, this time we're just going to keep the fingers in that same shape as the C7 chord. Just scoot up 2 frets from where C7 is. So it's going to sound like that. It's a really handy, really nice shape because if you think about the notes you have on strings 1, 2, and 3, you have a tiny scale, notes that are right beside each other in the scale. So this makes playing really pleasant sounding melodies very easy with this shape. We're also going to take the Saturday Night Rub version of this shape and scoot that up 2 more frets, where that's going to make an E7 chord here, which we can then use our low 6th string with. Now, aside from that, there's just one more shape here. It's going to be an A7 shape. It's going to look like this, and it's going to be built out of, you can think of this a few different ways. It's going to be connected to this movable A shape that we've been making in a lot of our tunes, but we're taking string 4 and lowering that note 2 frets. So that's where our bar can come over now all the way to string 4, take care of that note. Now we just have a bar and 1 extra finger on the 3rd fret. So this is building out of the E7 chord shape, where if we just look at the notes that are on strings 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can see that we have 1 finger right above the nut, so the index takes over the role of the nut, and now we have the bar and the middle finger here 1 fret higher. So here's an A note for the bass and an A7 chord. When we put these together, it's going to start to look like this. We're going to start off with a C chord and do some really typical kind of melody motions here with the pinky down on string 1. We're going to start with a melody note of C. It's going to jump over to string 1. Now we're going to make an E7 chord shape where we're going to leave string 4 open, and we're also going to take the pinky and fret a D on string 2. into a standard F chord shape. I'm not going to do any real tricks on this one. Just have a melody note on string 3 and 2. Back to a C chord. Now we're going to take this shape, add our pinky, and scoot it up 2 frets to make that D7 shape. And again, we're going to be able to make a melody happen here without changing the chord shape. We can just have the note move from string 2 to string 1. After that, we're going into a G chord. And then into a C chord. We're going to do a little walk up from G all the way back up to C so we can play that again. C chord, E7 chord with an open D string and a noted D on string 2. F chord, C chord. Now, again, add the pinky onto string 3 and shift it up 2 frets for our D7 chord. Melody is on string 2, 1, 2, G chord. And now back to a C chord. And here's where we're going to have a different bass walk now. We're going to come over to G like we did before, but instead of walking back up to C, now we're going to walk down to G. And that E note is going to be on our downbeat of the new section. It's going to launch us into an E7 chord. So we're going to come all the way up to here. And from this shape, we're going to be doing mostly pinches. So most of the melody notes are going to be timed with our thumb. There's going to be one syncopated note where we take our pinky and raise it up 1 fret just to make the melody a little bit more interesting, and then we're going to bring it back down into the chord shape like this. Now, rhythmically, this is pretty simple, but I've tried teaching this tune to a few people, and there's just something about the ordering of the melody strings here that's just unusual enough that it can throw you. So try this one a little bit slow, and again, if we're keeping our fingers in the chord shape, the melody notes are on strings 1, 3, 2, 1. Now, we're actually going to repeat that string pattern and that rhythm when we move into our next chord of A7. So now the thumb is going to be on strings 5 and 4, and we're going to do something similar where we do all these pinches with chord notes, but then we're going to raise the string 1 note 2 frets this time. The pinky will be perfectly positioned to do that. So here's the sound of the chord, there's the pinky raised note, and returning that note back into the chord. So again, the melody there is on strings 1, 3, 2, 1. From there, we're moving into our D7 chord where we are fretting string 5. And here we're going to have a melody that moves from string 2 to 3, 2, 1, 2, like this. And then we're landing in an open G, where we're going to have some similar melody motion across the strings. Now we're going to walk this G note back down to E and do the same thing over again. Back up to this E7. Into our A7. 7 chord. Now on the second time through, we're going to have a different ending to the section that's going to bring us back to the top of the tune, where we're going to just be making a G chord with our thumb on string 6, down a half step, down a half step, then back to an open G where our pinky is noting a melody note of D. And then after that, we're back to the top. Etc. So, if we put that all together and take it really slow, here's how it's going to sound. All right, so this is going to be the first pass through a version of Buddy Bolden's blues. This is a really classic New Orleans blues. Buddy Bolden was a really highly regarded cornet player in New Orleans who died before he was able to make any recordings of his playing. But a lot of the first musicians to go in and actually record New Orleans-style jazz would often credit him as one of their biggest influences. So we're going to learn this first down low on the neck. This tune has a lot of chord motion in it, a lot of activity, so we want to really clarify what these chords are before we then go into a second pass and learn how to play everything up high. For now, we're going to be working with some more familiar chord shapes. Now we're going to start with this kind of a G shape here, but we're going to hollow it out a lot to where we just have our thumb and our second and third strings fretted here. So we're going to start with the thumb hooked here at the 3rd fret. We're going to have these notes on the 2nd and 3rd strings. We're going to slide them down a half step, slide them down another half step, where once we bring the thumb over to string 4, we're going to have part of a D7 shape. So it's just a little bluesy lick here where the pinky is going to be on a B flat. We're going to come into a C7 chord, but we're only going to be working with the lower fretted strings here. We're going to have string 3 moving between the pinky playing that B flat note, an open string, and the index at fret 2. We're going to do that while the thumb pulses here on the low string 5. Back to the G chord, into the C7 section again. We're going to make this G chord and that bluesy lick again, but this time the melody's going to raise up to D. And this D note, you can think of that as part of the G chord, but it's actually going to be anticipating a E7 chord shape. So again, go ahead and get your fingers down in there. We're fretting a G sharp and a B note. We're leaving string 4 open. Then we're having our thumb come in there for their notes. After that, we've got a D chord where we're going to be fretting strings 2 and 3 like we normally would for an open chord shape. We're going to have the ring finger come over here and grab this F sharp note on string 4, fret 4. Back into an E7, an A7, and then return to that D chord shape. We're going to make this D7 shape kind of like we used in Saturday Night Rub. So E7, A7, D, D7. We're going to repeat most of that. So back to your G chord with a thumb on string 6. These notes are going to walk down a fret at a time. D7, G riff. C7 with our melody note moving around string 3. G riff. C7 again. Our E7 chord. And here's where we're going to take a second ending. Now we're going to go into an A7 chord. We're going to fret it a little bit differently than we have in the past. We're not going to use the bar here because we want our melody note on string 1 to be able to go from a G to an open E. We can't do that if the bar is here. So we're going to use 3 fingers. We're going to fret strings 4 and 2, but not 3. We're going to have this pinky in charge of the G note on string 1. And we're going to do into our D7. And here's where we're going to adjust this chord shape to give us another little bluesy melody here. I'm going to leave this finger here on F sharp, bring my index down to the 3rd fret, and so I can have a melody that goes from B flat on string 3 to B natural on string 2. Finally back to a G. So let's try to put that together slowly, just this first pass through the tune. Okay, now, once you get that down, you have a good understanding of what your chords are that you're moving through. Now we can try a tack on this where we're going to try to take as much of that as possible and move it up the neck. So we're essentially going to be taking the melody up an octave higher and plenty of other notes along with it. So if we think about these notes that we had moving as part of the G chord, is starting with a G chord shape. What we're going to do is we're going to find those notes way up here at the string 1 and string 2 at the 10th and 12th frets. These are going to be notes that would be a part of this barred A chord shape if we wanted to try and bar it this high, which we wouldn't because the frets are just too small at this point. So, but we are going to carve out of that just strings 1 and 2, and then where we were pulsing before with string 6 with our thumb, now we can just pulse on string 3. And we can do this with it. We're going to take these shapes. So again, we're just taking these two notes and moving them down one fret at a time, and we're either pinching them at the same time or we're plucking them one at a time from low to high. Then we're going to return to a G chord built out of a D shape. So here are the 7th and 8th frets. And we're going to do a quick little dip here down a fret before we come back down to this other G chord down here. So now we've got next, we had our C chord riff, where we had a melody that was moving between B flat, G, and A. We're going to use this C7 shape now. And again, putting that pinky to work, and also going to be lifting and dropping this middle finger over the 7 note of our chord. So the thumb's going to pulse down here, and we can... So again, I'm going from string 1 to string 2 with the pinky, back to string 1 where the bar catches it. Then we're going to return to our G chord. First as a D shape, then as this E shape. We're going to repeat that. So back to C7. Back to a G chord. Now up higher to an E7 chord. So it's the same shape that we use for a C7, but now higher, up at the 9th and 10th frets. Now, we're going to have a D chord here, kind of like we used at the very beginning with Angela and the Baker. Up 2 frets higher for an E, then up to an A, and finally to a D. So let's look at that again. So here's the D chord. So again, my thumb is on the D string. Up 2 frets higher to an E chord, my thumb goes to the E string. Then up to an A chord, the thumb goes over to the A string. And then we've got our D chord here where we're going to make this full shape. D7. We're going to repeat that now. G chord, another G chord, C7, G, C7, G, E7, and then at the ending here, we're just going to use the same ending as we had before. We're going to come down to A7 in our normal open position, D7. We're going to lower the string 3 note, 2 frets, back to G. All right, now let's see if we can't go really slowly through this up the neck pass through Buddy Bolden's Blues. I'm going to take it real slow now. All right, well, there you have it. Hopefully, if you can work through all these tunes, you're going to have a really good understanding of what these movable shapes are, how they're made, some really common ways that they're used. And if you really understand it, hopefully then you can go searching for your own types of movable shapes. Just taking chords that you already know, learning how to strategically position them on the instrument where you can exploit open strings with them. If you've enjoyed this lesson and you think you would benefit from more one-on-one instruction, I do offer online lessons. You can visit my teaching website at clintondavismusic.com and learn more there. All right, happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.